Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. Jack Dorsey is on a mission to change how social networks operate and interact with one another. This week, Twitter announced that Blue Sky, the company's open source project, has just hired crypto developer Jay Graber, who said she's excited to take on the role and build the future of social media. With me now for more, our Bloomberg Tech reporter, Kurt Wagner, who of course covers Twitter for us. So what exactly does this mean, Kurt?
This is such a complicated idea, and it's very idealistic, but imagine a world in which all of the posts that appear on Twitter, on Facebook, on Reddit, imagine that all of those are kind of available to any developer out there, right? And they can build an interface, a user interface that pulls all of those posts in, and think of, how many different versions of a social network there might be, right? There's going to be some with conservative algorithms, some with liberal algorithms. And that is kind of this future that Jack Dorsey imagines, kind of a social network without all the walls and the boundaries. And so that's what Blue Sky is intending to create, a technology layer that would essentially allow all of these different networks to contribute their content and then let other people build upon that.
Well, it certainly is a bit blue sky, or maybe pie in the sky. Would other companies need to buy in to this vision?
Yeah, this only really works if there's a bunch of companies that are willing to enable this technology, right? And so there's a belief from Twitter that if they enable it, perhaps they can kind of get the ball rolling, right? People might say, oh, if Twitter's doing this, it's a good idea. The problem is I can't imagine a Facebook doing this, for example, right? There's just too much valuable data that they have between Facebook and Instagram that they're not going to want those types of posts available to other developers. And so that's where I see is the big problem here, is that it kind of requires buy-in from the industry. And I'm not sure at this stage, certainly at this stage, I don't think we have that. And even once the technology is created, it's going to be a really tough sell.
Now, I recently spoke with Vitalik Buterin, who's known as the inventor of Ethereum, who's skeptical about some of Jack Dorsey's plans and also thinks that Ethereum and the blockchain in general pose a real threat to centralized social networks like Facebook and Twitter. Take a listen to what he had to say.
I think a lot of these projects want to actually do this, right? Because I think a lot of them are realizing that being a kind of centralized focus of power and having control and of so much of everyone's data and all of these things, like it's not just an asset, it can also be a liability as well.
I wonder is there any part of Jack Dorsey that's working on some of these efforts because he believes that Twitter is not sustainable necessarily in its current form, or that perhaps he's a little scared?
I think he believes truly that Twitter has too much power, and I think that was reinforced for him when the company had to make the decision about President Donald Trump's account back in January. I think we saw him shortly after that come out and say, hey, I agreed with this decision, but it also made me uncomfortable. We should not be, as a company in San Francisco, should not be deciding what is up and what is down. That's why this idea, this blue sky idea would work. In theory, Twitter could say, well, we're not going to allow these posts, but another network that's plugged into that same protocol could allow them, right? So it's not up to just one company to remove the posts of a president. And so I think that, the power that Twitter has a real impact on Jack Dorsey's thinking here.
So what are next steps here, Kurt?
Well, we heard that Jay Graber was appointed the leader of this project. Now, it's supposed to be an independent project, which means Twitter is funding it, but now it's going to kind of let it fly on its own. And so they're going to build up a small team and really get to work on actually crafting what this technology looks like. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways that they could go. There's some existing technologies out there that they could kind of build upon if they didn't want to start from scratch. But really, it's about now building that team and kind of, moving away from Twitter and doing this independently.
All right, Bloomberg's Kurt Wagner, thanks so much for that update and breaking it down into simple terms that we can try to understand. Kurt, thanks so much. Do not forget, you can catch more of my conversation with Ethereum creator Vitalik Buterin on Bloomberg Studio 1.0, Wednesday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 6:30 p.m. here on the West Coast. It's a fascinating conversation. And staying with the theme of decentralization, Square has announced it's investing $5 million in Renewable crypto mining. The company tweeting, "We're committed to driving further adoption and efficiency of renewables within the Bitcoin ecosystem, which is why we've teamed up with Blockstream to launch an open source renewable energy mining project as part of our Bitcoin Clean Energy Initiative." For more on the announcement, I want to bring in Blockstream co-founder and CEO Adam Back, who's also the inventor of Hashcash, a proof-of-work system used in Bitcoin mining. And Adam, it's incredible because that was used in Satoshi Nakamoto's original white paper. How long have you been thinking about the energy consumption issue around Bitcoin? When did you start to think this is a problem?
I mean, I think the energy consumption is best put in context because, globally there's a lot of zero emission power, and because the grid demands are uneven, grids are built to cover the peak capacity, and so they have typically a lot in reserve, and so that tends to get unused. So it's either unused capacity, or in some cases they have to pay people to shed excess capacity for power projects that spin up and down. So that's what the Blockstream energy announcement is about. And together with Square, we're also building a zero emission kind of pilot, which is fully open source, open sourcing the financing, the profitability, which people usually keep as proprietary information, to kind of prove the thesis that the Bitcoin mining can actually improve the profitability and therefore help fund building and expanding the zero emission power grid components in the world. So you may recall much earlier in the year, there were some power cuts in Texas, and that's because it's built to just in time. So with additional grid uses like this, which can turn on and off depending on pricing, you can improve the capacity so that you would have less risk of power cuts such as that.
Okay, so talk to us about how it works. You say you're leveraging the Blockstream satellite network to connect and operate these mining modules around the world. How exactly does this work, and how will this be used?
Yeah, so the mining modules, it's like a shipping container, it's sort of in a shipping container format, but it's a mini data center with mining in it. Some people may know about the Blockstream Satellite, which is a service for broadcasting Bitcoin data around the world. What's not as widely known, and we're seeing it here, is that we have also bidirectional capability sufficient to power a mining location, and so we can operate these basically anywhere in the world. Of course, some of them are we're basically buying power from the power producer, so they don't have to necessarily themselves look to achieve a Bitcoin exposure by doing it. So they buy the equipment, and then Blockstream buys the power from them, and so that can be intermittent power from solar, wind, or power that's coming up and down based on grid demand, or very remote power where there is not much local demand, sort of excess power.
Now, you're joining forces with Square to build a solar-powered Bitcoin mining facility in the United States. What can you tell us about this plan?
Yeah, so the interesting thing there is to kind of fully open source the business model. So actually at Blockstream, we'd had been analyzing mining and the economics for quite a while. And so we've reached this thesis that mining can sort of cross-subsidize or improve the profitability of zero emissions grid infrastructure. And so we saw an analysis report by ARC, co-authored with Square, which reached the same thesis. So we contacted them and got to talking. So we decided between us to actually build, a small-sized farm and demonstrate it with, open source dashboard, real-time data, and the financials getting into it.
What do you think about Dorsey's plans? What do you think about his plans for the TBD network in particular?
So this is the decentralized Twitter. I mean, I'm a fan of decentralization. I think that it's preferable for kind of internet freedoms, that social media companies don't kind of find themselves trapped in the editorial business, right?
Meantime, obviously so much has happened since Satoshi's original white paper, and I know you have a connection to that. If Satoshi were here today, what do you think he would think about the whole ecosystem, the community, the frenzy that's built up around his original idea?
Well, I mean, it's certainly a very large scale system at this point. So you'd have to imagine that Satoshi would be quite impressed with how far it came. Certainly for participants who have been involved in Bitcoin, in earlier years, 2015, 2013 or before, it started as a much smaller community hobbyist kind of activity. And so it's kind of the perpetual September effect, which is about the internet, and at any given time, the majority of the users are relatively new because it's growing so fast. And so Bitcoin has a lot of that. So there's a lot of enthusiasm and new users learning. I think it's easier and faster to catch up these days, so many more resources.
Bitcoin versus Ethereum. Do you think Ethereum will surpass Bitcoin someday?
I think they're very different use cases. So the smart contracting platforms, there are many competing platforms, and Blockstream has its own version of that, which is we operate, so we provide the technology, and that's operated by a number of exchanges around the world for the Liquid network, a layer 2 for smart contracting and asset issuance. And that has its own smart contracting system called Simplicity, which has formal provable security. So I think one of the things that's tended to let down the very real promise of smart contracts today is the very frequent and very large scale hacks of the systems. So it's only just last week that there was a $600 million hack of.
So what do you think is coming next in crypto that we're not talking about yet?
I think the sort of focus on value, on solving real use cases, and less kind of tokenomics aspect. So the security tokens, it's always coming full circle. So security tokens being an actual registered security where the investor has investor rights. So with the Blockstream mining, as well as enterprise customers, we also offer a financial instrument called the Blockstream mining notes. And that is both a security registered in Luxembourg and a security token. So an asset you can transfer and sell on to another user or on an exchange in the short term on the Liquid network, which is a layer 2 of Bitcoin. So being a layer 2, there is no new coin involved. It's just using Bitcoin in a similar way that Lightning uses Bitcoin.
All right, fascinating. Adam Back, CEO of Blockstream, thanks so much for joining us and telling us more about your plans. Okay, coming up, ARK Invest CEO Cathie Wood says China's crackdown on its tech companies is stunting innovation. We're going to bring you our
enjoyed this
exclusive
video,
interview with her.
please hit that thumbs up button. It'll help us to understand our audience and also allows YouTube to suggest similar videos to you. Thanks for watching. We hope to see you in the next one.